So I feel like all I'm saying after these kinds of events, when I drop out or don't win, I'm like, so what could I improve on? So what could I do better? And I'm not really sure yet. I really got to analyze because I felt good out there. There's just one thing: get faster and amp that stamina up. Be faster towards the end of the tournament. So there's one goal for this season, and that is win as many events as possible and win that belt. So see you guys next time. It's still unreal, but especially when I think about how it all started and how it was actually working to get there, because it didn't happen overnight. I've been working so hard, I've been practicing so hard with this one goal for a minimum of 6 weeks. It was more like 8 weeks in total to actually prime for this and condition my body and everything to, win this beauty. It's been unreal. The actual process of preparation started 6 weeks before the World Championship, and what I did is I was practicing 4 days on and 2 days off. So that means the process of work throughout a week, so one cycle was 4 days of hitting. The first day I hit 60 golf balls, the second day I had 60 golf balls, the third day I had 60 golf balls, that's all drivers. And then on the fourth day I hit, well, all out, 250 plus, sometimes 300 golf balls. And I try to be the fastest I can in the very last set of that day. And that worked out. So in the very beginning it was a mess. It was a total mess. So the first 3 cycles I was super slow in the very end and I was super exhausted. But the more I progressed throughout the weeks, the better I got on day 4. Basically that's what it's all about in long drive, and that's what I've learned last year because I ran out of steam on day 4. So I was great day 1, day 2, day 3. I was roasting everybody, and then on day 4, when it counts the most, I didn't have my best. I didn't have my A game. It was far off. I didn't hit the middle of the face at all. So that's what I've learned last year when I came third, and that's what I tried this year, to actually be the best I can in the very end when it matters the most. On day 1, when it started, it didn't start great. So my first set, I hit with Bryson, and one thing I've learned is to completely ignore who I'm hitting against. So most of the time I don't even know who I'm hitting against. So in other competitions, people sometimes approach me, we're like, hey, great set, Martin, or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, when are you hitting? And he was like, yeah, I just hit with you. And I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry, right? I just didn't realize because whatever, right? It's been one of the things that I changed this year, like mentally, how to focus on that certain set and the 6 balls only and your swing alone, and that's it. But when I hit with Bryson, I obviously know because I want to beat him. And that first set didn't go very well. I wasn't certain how to hit because it was a little bit into wind. I just completely switched my entire setup weeks before the competition. I switched to a different shaft. I switched to a different grip. I had a whole range of different shafts for different conditions, and I had absolutely no experience with them because it was my first competition I hit with it, with this particular shaft, with the TPTs. Before I was hitting the kinetic shaft, and the main difference between these shafts is actually the TPTs torque a lot less compared to the kinetics. So the twisting in the shaft itself. But when I started off on day 1, this first set, it was into wind. I didn't know how to tee it up because too high, when I teed up too high, the ball is launching too high. When I teed up too low, I'm not super comfortable with it. Also, what they just recently did is they completely changed the turf in Mesquite. So it was completely redone, and they did not get the sand or whatever they're supposed to put in there at the tee box in time. So we could actually not tee up a golf ball. It was very unstable, so we actually had to go with T-Claw. And in my experience, in practice sometimes I don't like T-Claw too much because it's kind of unstable sometimes and my balls tend to fall off the tee. So you really have to, if you drill it incorrectly and it sits great, it's a great tool because you can tee up wherever you want to. But when you're a little sloppy, just like myself, sometimes you don't tee it up correctly and then the ball is falling off the tee. So what did I do? I decided it's into wind, so I teed up fairly low. I go with a stiff shaft, and it was way too quick. That first set when I hit, I was so amped up. I was so excited for the tournament, but my swing was so off. It was like, I didn't take my time at the top, and I mishit it like crazy. And that's how I started off on day one with a 0, the worst start you can have. And then it got a little better. So then I committed to one of the shafts. I went with a 16 in my first round, my first set. Then second set, switched to the 17. And my game plan on day one was actually, I go 17 for 3 balls until I have one in, and then switch to the 19, which is softer. But I realized on that first day, because I didn't find the face like at all, it was not a really good day. So I mean, I made it through eventually, but I didn't really hit a good golf shot or a long drive shot. And then what I learned throughout the tournament was this switch from the 17 shaft to the 19, which is way softer, is not my prime game plan. Because the switch from a fairly stiff shaft, so the 17 is pretty comparable to the LD30 Plus that I was hitting before, so I was fairly used to the flags and like how it's supposed to be loaded and unloaded. But the 19 is a little softer, so you actually have to wait even longer at the top for it to actually load and then unload. And when you're excited, especially, I mean, at least when I'm excited in competition, I'm just way too quick. I'm just like, I'm not patient enough. So I, at some point, decided that I'd just stick to the 17 all the way through. That was not on day 2.
32 hitters left.
That was not on day 3. That was on day 4. And the turning point for me was actually day 4. Set 1, 318, getting 100 points for that because 2 guys went OB, fortunately. Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. It happened to me as well, but I was being very lucky that it happened to these guys at the same time when I was hitting in that set, because getting 100 points for 318 that day shouldn't exist, right? So that was a turning point. I gained a lot of points for that 318 ball, and then I just gained more self-confidence over and over again, and made it to the top 8, and then I was just locked in. Another element to my confidence to actually hit the ball a lot straighter was that I was working a lot on my wedge game. It might sound weird, but I was working a lot on my wedge game and the short iron game while I was in the States, to learn more about my wrists and more to basically educate my hands a little bit, because I have super uneducated hands. And well, Bryson, he kept telling me about that like forever, right? Because he's super malleable. He can change his swing in no time. He can do with his wrist whatever is needed. But I wasn't that malleable, and I was just hitting the golf ball, right? I have a throwing release in my long drive swing, which helps me a lot to create speed. But that's not the greatest release when you're hitting wedges or short irons. So one of the devices that I used was the Precision Impact. So basically what it does is, in the backswing, it kind of locks in and then holds your wrist in position. So you create a lot of forward shaft lean, and it kind of creates an interesting awareness of the wrists. So what I try when I swing back, especially when I practice this with wedges and irons, I try to swing back and then basically push into that device on the way through. And that creates an interesting feel, and it'll help me a lot with my awareness of the wrists. And ultimately then, these wedge drills and all that wedge stuff and short iron stuff that I was doing also helped me with my driving, because I was more aware of my wrists and where they are. So that was super helpful and gave me a lot of confidence to actually, well, hit the ball straighter. But would I recommend this for drivers? Not necessarily. Would I recommend this to work on wedge game, learn more about your wrists and educate your hands? Absolutely. It's great. So if you want to give it a shot, check out the description below and use my promo code for a couple dollars off. I've been so focused and so pumped up that I knew also my strategy at that point. I knew I'm going to win it. I knew it. I knew I'm going to hit a great ball and I'm going to win it. Because the sets before showed me how confident I can be, especially because I now finally, in the very beginning, I was struggling so much with the right club setup and the right grip, right like height and tee height and like all that stuff. So now I found it. I stuck to the 17 high shaft, and I knew, all right, so you just gotta hit your shot and just keep doing what you're doing, and it's gonna happen. And I stuck to the 17 high all the way through, no switching. I had a backup shaft with me, so I had a backup club, but I knew if you load and unload it correctly and hit the middle of the face, launch it high up in the air, it's game over. And one thing I remember is I approached Bryson just before the final. I was like, hey, Regicy's about to win the world championship, right? Because that was certain, right? That nobody could take that away from us. Unreal, isn't it? Like, he's a golfer. He's not supposed to be there. I mean, Bryson, don't get me wrong, right? But it's like, sorry, you play professional golf, and now all of a sudden you're in a world long drive final. I mean, he's a legit long driver, right? He's a professional long driver, and he did in only 2 years. That shouldn't exist, at least in my opinion. He's been 170 miles an hour ball speed 2.5-3 years ago, and now he's posting like 216, 17, and that's not even his fastest ball. He's been faster. He was over 220 a couple months ago. So, and he's still very, very accurate. You don't see sets from him that are like super erratic. I think he had an OB set, but that was all good shots down the left side that just went OB. It's not like they were in the houses or whatever. And you gotta hit your best shot, because he's always gonna put one in. He's always gonna put a good ball in. He can change height, he can change spin, he can change curve. And that's why he's so dangerous, because he brings those two elements like golf and long drive together and actually dares to make that change. And that's so impressive. And it's been the most electric final I've ever played, obviously, right? When Bryson hit his last shot, and he was yelling like crazy, and mine wasn't bad either, right? I was focused on my shot, and I was like, oh my God, yeah, and everybody was cheering, and I for a second I thought they're cheering because I hit that shot, but then I was like, oh my God, they're cheering because Bryson hit that shot, right? And he was jumping around, going crazy. I was like, oh my God, if he caught that and that catches the right spot in the grid and it bounces forward, it might beat my ball, right? It was unreal. And then as soon as it took forever, to be honest, in my mind, then like it felt like years. As soon as they called my name, or like Seamus said,
ladies and gentlemen, your new world champion, 426
yards,
Borgmeier!
426 yards, and I knew, yeah, that is me. I only had in mind I want to get that belt.
Yeah, buddy, running around the tee box.
Right, that's all I want to have. I want to have that belt. And then my next memory is I don't remember any of the sprinting down there, like all the weird stuff. My brain wasn't really capable of doing anything, I have a feeling. Just did it. And I got back, and then the first thing I remember is someone yelling at me, "Martin, you took the wrong belt." Right? Then I realized, like, oh my God, I got the ladies belt. I looked at it, I was like, it said ladies world championship, or world champion. And then I thought, why is that ladies belt even here? The ladies championship was in Japan, right? But probably because one of the Japanese guys is supposed to take it home with him so he can hand it over to the girl. Like, it never felt heavy when I held it up, but that could be due to like all the adrenaline, obviously, like rushing through my body. It was a feeling. It was unreal. And the cool part is, I told my wife that morning when we drove to the grid. And sometimes you're telling stuff like, yeah, I'm gonna win, and like, yeah, I guess I'm gonna win this, because obviously you have to believe, right? But that morning, I knew it. I already saw myself holding up that belt. It was crazy. It was an interesting feeling, and that gave me that little bit of self-confidence that I needed in the final, and especially because I worked so hard for it and I conditioned myself to get to that point, and I did it so many times before on that fourth day to be fast and good in the very end. That gave me that confidence that I'm capable of winning this.